Such an interesting line of questioning, since you brought up people walking into the U.S. Capitol, right? So it's such an interesting line of questioning. I believe it was Alito, but it may have been Gorsuch, saying, "What if a president leads a protest, peaceful protest?" Well, presidents have done that in the
Right.
past,
Right.
and that disrupts things, right? Certainly, very disruptive, right? Order the National Guard troops that Kennedy did, to go integrate colleges in the South, right? What if the president leads a peaceful protest? What if that
Yeah.
disrupts an official proceeding? So the president now, 22 years in prison, like it's such a I thought that was such a fascinating point, and the point that you just brought up is the obvious shades of gray here. Clarence Thomas asking about presidents carrying out coups. I mean, Clarence Thomas is straight up just like, presidents have carried out coups. They have murdered other world leaders. They have done regime change. He brought up Operation Mongoose. Clarence Thomas is straight up being like, these are you're literally
Right.
slaughtering. You're ordering the slaughter of
Yeah.
people and the regime change of people you don't like.
And that's why it
So
all comes back to this. You notice they mentioned several times. Um, it's never been done. We don't prosecute presidents. They bring up Nixon, but it is an entirely different standard in Nixon. And many in the court think that Nixon was decided, poorly, and that there are some things that need to be changed in that regard. But you'll notice nobody else is prosecuted, and that was an important point for several because they're saying to themselves, are we going to try to stray from this powerful protection we give to the head of the executive branch, or are we going to facilitate, a change in the future of our country in which we use the power that we have in order to go after our political enemies? And I'll just tell you this, Benny, that was sort of hit me very, very profoundly is
please.
when when the founders of our Constitution decided, and there was discussion and debate whether or not a president with a felony, a candidate with a felony, could run for president, they nearly unanimously decided that they should be allowed.
Hmm.
And the reason they decided that was because they knew they were giving extraordinary power to the executive branch. And they knew that the power to investigate and to prosecute someone, to take away their liberty, was so powerful that it could be wielded abusively. And if that was the case, they could foresee that they would go after a political opponent.
Hmm.
So why would a founding fathers, why would they so importantly decide that they were not going to prevent someone from running for president if he had a conviction, a felony conviction, but at the same time make the protection of the president while he's in office and his conduct, make it so weak that they could be prosecuted easily after they leave? That makes no sense whatsoever. The only consistency would be is if they wanted to protect the president, they wanted to prevent people from using the power of the prosecution to eliminate an enemy, and the way they backstop that is to not allow, to expand immunity enough to not allow them to go after them after they're in office. And that is the only consistent reading of the constitutional immunity and the Article 2 clause and that extends this power. And I don't care if you don't like Donald Trump and you're very upset and angry at him, you should not be wanting to rule along the lines of that Dreven is asking us to do, because it is changing that landscape. It is denying what the founders foresaw, and that was the use of prosecution to go after political enemies.
Brett, weren't all the founders felons by British law?
Right, right. So many of them, and so many of them also represented, felons were lawyers that represented them, and they understood abuse of power like nobody else did. In our filtered and in our now woke culture that we're in now, nobody really believes on the left that government is really that abusive, right? They think government is the answer for solving so many of our social issues. But in fact, this country is founded on recognizing that government is the exact opposite of a solution to a social
Hmm.
problem.
Hmm. Can you, without like characterizing it further, I suppose, because there's all these great quotes and there's all sort of these very interesting approaches here, obviously from the Trump lawyer and from Dweeben, but for us, I suppose, given that you have done this for 3 decades and that you know the consequences of the Supreme Court getting it wrong, and the current makeup of the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh calls this a monumental decision that will echo throughout the ages, he said.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like, do you think this was a good or a bad day for the team that is defending Donald Trump here? Do you think that the Supreme Court will return something that just that destroys Jack Smith prosecutions of President Trump?
Yeah, it's a great question. My thought after listening to it, and it's always sort of crystal ball moment, right? Trying to predict it. But I do think that it's a good day. On balance, it is a far better day for Trump's defense team than it was for DOJ. And I say that because you also had some expression of concern about what they do by those who are the left-leaning justices. And though they may in the end side with DOJ, it's far more likely that you'll get a 6-3 decision in which they reverse the DC Circuit opinion. They may send it back for them to make additional findings, which will certainly delay, and that's a benefit to Trump's defense team. But at best, they also may reverse and may solidify the fact that their concern is about going after a former president, in line with, remember what Gorsuch, I believe it may have been Kavanaugh. No, it was Kavanaugh, I think, said. He said, remember, we just recently have a decision in which we said our concern would be to pick the man and then scour the law books to find something we can go after him for. And with that mentality, that's a good day for the defense team on balance. And I would suggest you're probably going to get a 6-3. It could be 5-4, but a 6-3 decision reverse in the DC Circuit. And then the question will be, do they give them? Is it enough to tear down the Jack Smith prosecution? That's a possibility. I think it's within play. There's many that believe that the more likely is to reverse the DC Circuit and give them instruction on, follow-up that they need to do in order to reach the decision, in which case we might be back in front of the Supreme Court.